Welcome, fellow recovering traditionalists, to episode 178, Students Who Struggle with Less Than Problems. Welcome to Build Math Minds, the podcast, where fidelity to your students is greater than fidelity to your textbook. I'm your host, Christina Tonnevold, the recovering traditionalist and BuildMathMinds.com founder, where my mission is to change the way we teach elementary math to our kiddos. So, are you ready to start building math minds and not just creating calculators? Let's get started. This episode comes from a question that someone sent in. I have a question for you. Our second grade teacher came to me yesterday and asked what she can do to help kids understand this problem. 86 is 10 less than ? The answer being 96, but they don't understand the way it is worded. If it was what is 10 less than 96, they would know it's 86. Any suggestions? So these types of problems are tricky, but especially because they have no context to tie the problem to. For example, you can get at the same idea, but have a problem like, John has $86. He has $10 less than Sue. How much does Sue have? So, my first recommendation is to use lots of story problems so that they see the math in context in order to understand what is happening with the amounts. This example that I just gave is considered a compare with larger unknown type of story problem. Not that your students need to understand the type of problem it is, but you should understand that as the teacher. There are actually 3 types of comparison problem types, and typically this first one is the one that most textbooks use. It's called a compare difference unknown. So it sounds something like this. John has $86. Sue has $96. Who has more? How much more? Now you could ask who has less and how much less, right? Another type of compare is compare when the smaller is unknown. So using that same context, it would sound something like this. John has some money. He has 10 less than Sue, who has $96. How much money does John have? And then the final type, which is the most difficult type of comparison, is when you're comparing and the larger is the unknown. Okay? John has $86. He has $10 less than Sue. How much does Sue have? Now again, they do need exposure to all of these story problems, even the normal compare difference unknown problems that include the wording fewer or less, but those are a bit more common in math materials. So it's not something many teachers really need to worry about adding into their resources. However, the compare with larger or compare with smaller unknown are not common story problem types, but kids need exposure to it, with the larger unknown being the least common, which is why kids struggle with that type of scenario. So we need to make a point of including them into the curriculum that we're using because they're most likely not in there. My other recommendation is to use lots of visuals. These types of story problems are often modeled with bar models, where you draw a bar for John or Sue, whichever is given, and then talk about what the bar for the other person should look like based upon the information in the problem. So for example, in that original problem I gave of John has $86, he has $10 less than Sue, how much does Sue have? Students would draw a bar and label it as John's and put that it's worth $86. Then use the information in the problem to decide how to draw a bar to represent Sue's. John has $10 less than Sue, so whose bar should be longer in this scenario, right? The more students use these visuals to represent the contextual problems, then we can help them transfer that to solving them when it's just bare problems like the one that she sent in, where it was 86 is 10 less than something, right? And they have to find out what the something is. So the answer to that original question of how to help students with those types of problems really does boil down to two of my quote unquote go-tos whenever kids are struggling with a math concept. So keep these in mind whenever you have kids struggling. Number one, put it in context. Kids need to see those numbers in some kind of contextual situation because then it actually starts making sense to them. They're just not bare problems on a piece of paper. Number two, make it visual. Again, when you can see it, it brings it to life and it makes it way more easier to understand. Now, for members of the Build Math Minds PD site who want more in-depth training on all the problem types, Annalise Rucker did a couple of great mini courses about problem types for addition and subtraction and one for multiplication and division. So if you are a member, make sure you log into the PD site and just search up in the search bar problem types or problem types mini course and it should come up. If you aren't a member, you can always join at buildmathminds.com/BMM. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about problem types, if this is new to you, just Google it. Look up math context story problems and what types are out there and familiarize yourself with that. But for those who are Build Math Minds members, we've got it all laid out for you. All right, my fellow recovering traditionalists, until next week, keep building math minds.